Welcome to the Top 5 Show. I am Evan Brooks, joined by digital content producer Keith Swiger. We are here to break down the top matchups that we're looking forward to this weekend. Keith, a lot of good games on the slate, and let's start with our game of the week.
Okay, that's a good one out of the Lancaster-Lebanon League Section 2 rivalry game we got going on. Warwick at Manheim Central. These two teams are very familiar with one another. The schools are roughly 7 to 8 miles apart. Neighborhood rivalry. They've had a lot of big games over the years. And Warwick, you know, they a couple years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, they snapped a long losing streak against Manheim Central. They've been living off that ever since. Yep. They actually beat them twice that year. So a big game there. That kind of injected a little more juice into this rivalry. And this one should be a good one. Manheim Central coming in with an undefeated 4-0 record. Warwick is on a 2-game winning streak after dropping their first 2 games to open the season. So both teams have some momentum going into this one. As I said, you know, Warwick 2 in a row. They beat Cedar Crest 26-20 and last week knocked off Conestoga Valley. So they're coming in pretty hot. Yeah. They've got a good quarterback, Jake Reed, who has 880 passing yards and 7 touchdowns already. And Brendan Snyder, their wide receiver, his battery mate, leads the league with 26 catches, 402 yards. That's second in the league, and he's scored 4 times. So the passing attack is going to be tough for Manheim Central here. The Barons, as I said, 4-0, knocked off Susquehanna Township big last week, 49-0. That was kind of they had a extra non-league tune-up game due to the scheduling quirks in the Lancaster-Lebanon League. They come in with the league's number 2 offense, 438 yards and 46 points per game. So they can put up some numbers too. This should be a good one. I'm really looking forward to it. Should be a great matchup.
Sounds like both of these teams can really, really score. And as you mentioned, obviously a huge rivalry. It's been a couple years since Manheim Central has beaten Warwick. So I know the Barons are really itching for this and trying to get that win. Moving on to our second game, we'll go Cumberland Valley at Harrisburg. This seems like another big-time matchup as well. And both these teams are playing well.
Yeah, and you'll be able to watch this. We'll be streaming this live with our friends at High School Sports Live. That game's at 1 o'clock on Saturday at Harrisburg. This is a old school Mid-Penn Commonwealth rivalry. 2 of the traditional powerhouses. Harrisburg, of course, is Harrisburg. They need no introduction. Cumberland Valley was a powerhouse both in the conference and in the District 3 playoffs. Kind of fell onto some lean times a couple years ago, but they are back and ready to go. Undefeated 4-0 in this one. Harrisburg was idle in week 1, but they've won 2 of 3 coming into this as well. Their only loss was a last-second real close loss to Manheim Township back in week 2. So they've gotten themselves right again, and they'll be ready to go in this one. They beat Carlisle 44-15 last week. Nice. And the player to watch in this one for Harrisburg, Kyle Williams, he's a Temple recruit. He had 161 yards and 3 touchdowns last week for Harrisburg. So they've got talent all over the sidelines, but he's like the real standout for them.
Of course.
And Cumberland Valley, their player to watch, quarterback Isaac Sines, he had 3 touchdowns and 112 rushing yards last week in a big win over Central Dauphin East.
Right.
He is currently the team's leading rusher. So there are 2 good players matched up in this one. And again, another great matchup in Mid-Penn Commonwealth between 2 of the teams that have really gone at it over the years. And this should be another chapter in their big rivalry.
Absolutely. Sounds like another pair of teams that can really score on the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned Kyle Williams. Getting him involved early and often, I'm sure, will be a big part of Harrisburg's game plan. And the quarterback, Isaac Sines, like you said, for Cumberland Valley, seems like he's a playmaker as well. So this should be a high-scoring affair. And, looking forward to it, especially with our High School Sports Live crew there. Let's stick in the Mid-Penn. Going down to Greencastle, Antrim, and East Pennsboro for our third game. What do you like in this one? What are you looking forward to seeing?
Good matchup here in the Mid-Penn Colonial. We talked about losing streaks in the Manheim Central Warwick matchup. Well, last week, Greencastle snapped an 8-game losing streak against Waynesboro. So they're coming into this one riding high, 4-0. East Pennsboro comes in 3-1. So this is kind of an early season showdown among the 2 division leaders so far. Player to watch for Greencastle, that's Tavon Cooper. He had 229 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns last week in their 35-21 victory. So he's a guy that you're going to have to game plan around if you're East Pennsboro. And then for East Pennsboro, it's quarterback Keith Oakes. Yeah. He had 4 touchdowns and 202 rushing yards for the season. That leads the team. He's passed for 164 yards and 2 TDs, so he's kind of a dual threat, but more of a problem on the ground. And that's somebody that, if you're Greencastle Antrim, you're going to have to focus on stopping him.
Absolutely. And with them being 4-0, obviously they're riding high right now. What does East Pennsboro kind of have to look out for just to make sure that they can keep this one competitive?
Well, as I mentioned, Greencastle Antrim, they like to do it on the ground. Cooper is their main cog, but he's not the only weapon there. So they're really going to have to focus on maybe stacking that line of scrimmage and really stopping the run first, making Greencastle beat them through the air if they're going to do that. That'll probably be the approach they'll use.
Absolutely. Sounds like another good matchup. Let's move on to the LL League. We got Hempfield and Manheim Township. Obviously, these two teams know each other well as well. They're two really good teams. Lost a little bit last year with some seniors graduating. Obviously, Anthony Ivy from Manheim Township moving on to Penn State. But what are we looking forward to in this one?
Well, again, rivalry games are kind of the theme this week. And, boy, Hempfield and Manheim Township in Lancaster County, it doesn't matter the sport. It doesn't matter what we're talking about here. These two schools do not like each other. It's always pretty intense. Basketball, wrestling, whatever you name.
Right.
They go at it. Swimming even. Like, my daughter's a swimmer. She's ready for Manheim Township every year. So on the football side of the field, Hempfield, they're coming off a 42-7 win over McCaskey last week. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns in that game, and they've really been hanging their hat on their defense this year. They're allowing 258 yards a game. That's among the league leaders. Wow. So that's really how they've been getting it done all year. They're 3-1. Their only loss is a loss to Central York, which is certainly, there's no shame in that. Manheim Township, meanwhile, they've won 3 in a row. They lost their season opener to Cumberland Valley, undefeated since then. And it's kind of a battle of, what's going to give here, because the Blue Streaks have the league's number 2 passing offense. Right. They average 253 yards per game through the air. And quarterback Hayden Johnson is the guy that makes that go. He has 1,000 passing yards already, 9 touchdowns. So he's the guy, if you're Hempfield and you're getting ready to get the defense going in that one, that's the guy you got to focus on for the Black Knights.
Only week 5 and already 1,000 passing yards.
Yeah, he can sling it.
It sounds like they have a high-flying offense. And then, as you mentioned, for Hempfield, they got some playmakers on that side of the ball.
Absolutely.
Rivalry games, always fun. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing that one, I should say. Let's move on to our last game in the York Adams, Southwestern and Central York. You mentioned how good Central York is. No shame in losing to them. They've seemed to be riding high, ever since their season opener.
Yeah, and again, early season showdown between two teams probably expected to be contenders here. I know York High will probably have something to say about that before the year is over. But yeah, Southwestern, Central York, real good game in Division I of the York Adams League. Southwestern, they're coming off their first loss of the season. They lost 20-14 to Dallastown last week. That game was decided in the final minute with a late touchdown. It was pretty competitive the whole way through. Right. So they got to be, jonesing to get back on the winning track here. They have wins over Susquehannock, Dover, and New Oxford so far. And Central York, big win over Spring Grove last week, 42-7. They led 35-0 at halftime. Yeah. So didn't really have to sweat that one too much. Player to watch for them is Nasir Still, the quarterback. He took over for Bo Perbula, which, Penn State fans, know who he is. He's up in Happy Valley doing his thing up there now. So far, so good for Still. He had 2 touchdown passes and a long touchdown run of 46 yards last week. So he's really been settling into that role. He was kind of the understudy for Perbula for most of his high school career, and he's really taken off now that he's gotten the reins of the team. He's the guy, if you're Southwestern, you got to focus on stopping him first. So again, should be a really good matchup. We have so many games now in Central Pennsylvania. There's averaging like 50 games a week. It's, hard to overlook some of these teams, but these 5 matchups, really good ones, and should really make for an entertaining week of football.
Absolutely. You mentioned Nasir Still. I got to see him early in the season when they played Central Dauphin. Like you said, he's really taking the reins at that quarterback position. Looks good, strong, accurate. Hits his receivers, Parker Hines. So he's been impressive. I will say that, to take over for a guy like Bo Perbula and come in and step right in and produce is pretty good for them. So definitely a bunch of good games that we're looking forward to. Let's just pick one quick one, the one you're looking forward to the most this week.
Well, I think it got to be the game of the week, Warwick Manheim Central. That's going to be a great one. Of course, the Fox 43 sports team will be there to get everybody ready for the action in that one at 6 o'clock on the High School Football Frenzy. And then at 11 o'clock, all the highlights, the interviews, all the insights to the game. That's in the expanded Frenzy post-game show, Friday nights at 11. So if you can't get out to the games this week, be sure to get out there for those. You got the sports staff here does a great job of breaking everything down. A lot of games to cover, but we get through them all.
We sure do. We make our rounds for sure. Keith, thanks so much for joining us. Can't wait for another great week of football and looking forward to it.
All right.